Ryan Walters can give Washington one of the Big Ten's best defenses in 2025.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now. Unfortunately, no Lars Hansen today. We had a little bit of a scheduling conflict, so he'll be back tomorrow. But in the meantime, wherever you get this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, make sure to click that subscribe button, click that little bell as well right down below so you never miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you're on the audio-only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Now, got a lot of fun stuff coming for you on today's show. I want to spend some time at the very end talking about just some of the other things I saw on the practice field today, because one thing that I've been thinking about a lot over the last couple of days is why DeMond Williams Jr. is the ultimate college football weapon, but I'm going to get to that in a little bit, because one thing that I really wanted to make sure we spent some time talking about on this here show is Ryan Walters and this Washington defense, because first of all, I have to start here. The biggest star of the day, and really one of the biggest stars over the last week or so of practice for me personally, has been junior safety Alex McLaughlin, the transfer from Northern Arizona, who during the spring, he was running a lot with the second team. I know it's something we've talked about a little bit, maybe if you're following us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, wherever, you've seen some of the shorts that we've posted of some of our conversations with various players and coaches with what's going on around the program. And one guy whose name has continued to come up is Alex, the junior transfer from Northern Arizona, who had 167 tackles, 16 pass breakups, 6 interceptions at that FCS level. Now he's transferred up to the FBS, and he looks like someone who, after putting on 15 pounds over the summer, can contribute wherever you need him. He made the biggest play of the day today, in my opinion, where DeMond Williams Jr. was rolling out to his left, and he tried to hit Decker DeGraff, who's just kind of tippy-toeing along the sidelines, and the ball got tipped up in the air, and Alex made a really nice play to lay out and pull in the interception. His teammates went nuts. He threw the ball about 100 feet in the air in celebration after the fact. But once I saw that play, I started thinking, and it's something we were talking about on the sidelines, me, our good buddies, Christian Capel, Andy Yamashita, we all just kind of looked at each other and said, yeah, it feels like Alex is really starting to solidify himself as one of these starting safeties. And I think he is the perfect encapsulation of why Ryan Walters' defense can work so well at Washington. Because this is a guy who we've seen him play both safety positions through his time in the spring, his time now in the fall, where he's played a little bit in the post. Now he's played a lot more in that down safety role in the box, where I feel like that's where this coaching staff is really going to want to end up using him more, because he's a really good tackler. He's got a nose for the football where he can play man coverage, like I just talked about, against tight ends, against some of these wide receivers who might walk down into the slot. So I think that he's someone who you can use there, and he's going to be able to fit plays in just against the run, where he's done a really nice job so far just doing that as well in fall camp, of fitting run gaps and just doing a really good job. Basically playing linebacker is probably the best way to say it, because that's what these safeties are asked to do when they're playing a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage, which leads into my main point here. Alex is a really good athlete with great range. He's been able to just prove that he can play in the post and play a lot of different coverages over the top and do what Ryan Walters told me at preseason media day, what he calls just putting a roof over the top of the defense. And just having as many guys like that as possible who can play several different positions is something that is so valuable to any defense. And I feel like it's a lot of reasons why I was high on Steve Belichick last year as well, is Ryan Walters is the kind of defensive coordinator who understands that you can have several different kinds of players who come in and excel in one area. Look at his outside corners in Ephesians Prysock and Takario Davis. Those guys are wonderful in press man coverage. Having them, fit runs, they've certainly improved at that over their college careers, since they're both, seniors now. But I look at a guy like Alex, I look at CJ Christian in the same light. All of these safeties, really, McEllisteen, Rylon Dillard-Allen is starting to get to that point as well. And when you understand that these guys are just big, talented athletes who are really good tacklers, but also have the ability and range to play over the top. It not only proves what Washington's recruiting is, it's you're not pigeonholing these guys into certain roles. You're not taking Alex and saying, hey, we're going to have you play in the box 95% of the time, and every once in a while, we're going to move you around and have you do different things. No, there are so many different ways that you can find a way to get a guy like that involved. And I feel like Steve Belichick's defense showed that a lot at different points last season when we saw how Kamori House emerged, when we saw how just some of these other guys, Thaddeus Dixon in the same light, just made plays because they were put in positions to succeed. And Ryan Walters' defense is going to give Xe'ree Alexander is the guy I want to get to in a minute, and so many other players like that who excel in multiple different spots on the field, opportunities to succeed. Let's run through some of these numbers real fast. Last season, Washington finished 9th in the Big Ten in total defense at 328.4. They also finished 11th in scoring defense at 23.8. Now, I don't need to get into some of Ryan Walters' numbers from Illinois a couple years ago because we know he understands what it's like to play in the Big Ten and what it's like to succeed in the Big Ten calling defenses and what he needs to do that. What I do want to talk about is why I think that this defense can just take that big step forward, because I look at this defensive line and I think it's going to do a much better job of getting pressure on opposing quarterbacks, especially if some of these guys can stay healthy. We saw Zach Durfee have a great day today with a couple of sacks. I want to talk about him a little bit more later on, so make sure you stay tuned for that. But I just look at this defensive line as a whole. And if Zach can emerge, Anterio Thompson can emerge, Taitayu Youngalola, just one other guy who proves that in this 5 down front, where just like I've been talking about, just puts guys in positions to succeed. If they can just go out there and prove that and do it, then Washington's defense can drop 15, 20 yards off of these totals that they allowed last season, especially if a lot of that is coming in the run game, which Lars and I have talked about a lot, and how those numbers were so inflated last year because the defensive line depth was really thin and you couldn't find ways to stop the run. If this defensive scheme, which is going to clog the line of scrimmage, there are going to be 5 guys along the line consistently with 7 guys in the box a whole lot because Ryan Walters trusts his defensive backs to play in that man coverage on the outside. If you can stop the run and consistently force opposing offenses into 2nd and 9s and 3rd and 6s and 7s, those are things that this defense last year, especially down the stretch, was not able to do. And I think a guy who can really play a big role in that is someone that Brian Odom, the linebackers coach, talked about after practice today in Xe'ree Alexander. He said, this is a guy I've been really impressed with. He's really flashed for us a lot while playing stack backer on the inside or lining up as an outside linebacker, which is where I think his best role might be long-term, because I look at him now that he's up to 245 pounds. He's done a really good job of just making plays in space. We saw him have a couple of tackles for loss the other day against a few different running backs. I think one of them was on a receiver as well, actually. And he's just done a really good job fitting the run. He's done a really good job rushing the passer with need be. And while he hasn't really gotten home for any sacks, he's done a good job forcing quarterbacks to step up and either making a rush throw or just walking him into somebody else for a sack. And I think that's one of the biggest things about Xe'ree that just defines this defense as a whole, is a guy like that. He shouldn't be confined to just playing inside backer or just playing outside backer. When you can move him around the formation and just find different ways to help him be productive in the best way possible, that's the best way to call a defense. To quote Steve Belichick from last year, is to have it fit your players. That's something that Ryan Walters said as well during spring practice once he first got to campus, because that is so much of what playing defense, not just in the Big Ten is, but just playing defense in this modern age of football is just putting your best athletes and your strongest tacklers in position to make plays. And that's why we've seen so many of these 3 safety looks during fall practice. It's not just because these guys can excel in the post or excel in the down, play both. They can also slide out and play nickel if need be. We've also seen Leroy Bryant there. We've seen Rashawn Clark there, but there are so many different things that these guys can do. And instead of saying, no, it's, we're pretty traditional with 2 safeties on the field, or even just 1 at times, and we have a dime look out there, this coaching staff, and especially Ryan Walters, is not afraid to deploy guys and put them in the best position to succeed on a down in, down out basis, which is really exciting. But another thing that's really exciting is just watching Damon Williams just tear it up. And we'll get to that right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week one even kicks off, this is your moment. A future I'm really into, not on the NFL side, on the college side of things, is Washington over 7.5 wins this season. I love the young talent on this team. I love the way this schedule shapes up. And if DeMond Williams takes the step forward that everyone expects him to, maybe you can throw in some DeMond Williams Heisman futures bets on there. There are a whole lot of different things that you can do over on the FanDuel app. So visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. All right, this is something I've been cooking up here for a couple of days. I've been really interested. The reason I led with the defense is because Washington's defense has done a really, really good job of containing DeMond Williams Jr. over the last couple of days. Now, that also plays into my point and what I want to talk about here, because I believe that DeMond Williams Jr. is the ultimate college football weapon, which is one of many, 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 many reasons that Jedd Fisch has gone on every talk show you can possibly think of to say, hey, this kid's going to be in New York one day for the Heisman ceremony. He's going to be a high caliber NFL draft pick. And I believe he's going to have a lot of success through his time at Washington. It's why he crowned him as the face of Washington football before he took his first snap as a starter. Like, there's so much that goes into the talent that DeMond already just possesses. But after throwing 3 interceptions in the last 2 days, which I don't think he had even 1 or 2 to this point in camp coming into Tuesday's practice. The days really do blend together at this point of fall camp. But I got to thinking to myself, I just can't think how defenses are going to contain DeMond Williams on a drive-to-drive basis. And it's not because he's just more athletic than everybody else on the field. It's not because he really does have just tremendous arm talent for a quarterback. And it's not even just the combination of both of those things. I believe Washington has a tremendous supporting cast around him. When you look at Jonah Coleman, Adam Muhammad, Jordan Washington's running backs group, plus Denzel Boston, Rasheed Williams, Omari Evans, all these other receivers that are fighting for a spot in the rotation right now, combined with not only what DeMond brings to the table with his athleticism, with his arm talent, but also combined with what Jedd Fisch understands with how to just get the most out of a guy like this. Now let's rewind to Tuesday's practice. Lars and I talked about on our Wednesday show, as all you everydayers know, that Tacario Davis had a stellar day. He picked off DeMond Williams twice. One of them was on a somewhat bad decision, but also just good coverage by Tacario, who did a really good job of not letting Rasheed Williams release and get downfield, and it wound up being an overthrow and a pick for the, in my opinion, future All-American corner. The second one was just a really nice play where he undercut the route right along the sidelines, made a really nice play. I say all that because that led to a couple of drives where DeMond was, I don't want to say he was being timid, because that's certainly not what it was, but he was a little bit more inaccurate than we have seen him at any point during fall camp, especially when Jedd Fisch decided to make one of the very first comments after the scrimmage on Saturday that he was really impressed with how the offense had been protecting the ball to this point in camp. All of these things are great until obviously, things start to fall apart for one reason or another, when you run into a talented defense, whatever it might be. This is where DeMond becomes the ultimate weapon in college football, because I just remember seeing him throw a couple of incompletions in a row that were a little bit too high, that just didn't seem like they were the typical throws that he made last year when he completed over 78% of his passes. And so to get him back into rhythm, Jedd Fisch just called a read option, and DeMond was able to, I was really not in the best spot to see if he made the right read, but he did a really good job just getting around the outside man and taking up the field for 7 or 8 yards. And from that point on, he did seem to get back into rhythm and was just starting to be more consistent and more accurate. And it's one of those things where you just look at what DeMond brings to the table, and you see somebody who can just beat you in so many ways, which really does hamstring a defense in terms of, do you want to commit an extra guy to defend against the read option, or it turns into a play action or something like that? Do you want to keep somebody back as a quarterback spy, but he can still beat that guy to the edge because he does have that level of athleticism. And on plays like that, where it's, oh, he's out of rhythm because, our defense has done a really good job of containing him or making him make tough throws. All of a sudden, yeah, he can get around the edge and pick up 6, 7, 8 yards of play because he has that level of speed as well. Those things make it really difficult. But then again, combining him with everything else that Washington brings to the table this season, with a preseason All-American at running back, a preseason All-American at wide receiver, and a significantly improved offensive line that if it goes from allowing the most amount of sacks in the Big Ten to, middle of the road in the conference, is going to be an improvement in leaps and bounds, to say the very least. So I look at all of those things and I just can't help but think that Demond is going to find a way to maximize all this. And this just plays into everything that Jedd Fisch has been saying about him throughout the offseason, that this is why we are so excited about this kid. And this is why we are putting so much on his shoulders, because he can beat just any team in the country in so many different ways. I don't know if we're going to see that this season, but he does have that level of potential and that level of talent. So that's what I'm really excited to see from him going forward, because there are going to be days where that, I think, passing wise, they could look like what he did in the Sun Bowl, where he completed 80% of his passes for 374 yards and 4 touchdowns. And I feel like we're also going to see days where maybe he's not necessarily as accurate. Maybe it's raining a whole bunch and you can't pass the ball the way you might like, and you're going to need him to do things a little bit differently. And that's where I talk about Jonah Coleman and what I think he's going to do this season. And when I say I think he's going to take a step back from having 216 touches last year, this is where I talk about those things, because Demond is such a weapon on the ground as well, where Jedd Fisch has proven that he's not afraid to design touches for him in the run game. He's proven that he wants to get him involved in the read option as much as possible. I feel like we're going to see plays this year where there are 2 running backs on the field alongside him, which I know people would argue taking off a receiver isn't always the best move, but it's something Lars and I talked about on the show a week or 2 ago. Having a triple option on the field with Demond Williams, Jonah Coleman, and Adam Muhammad or Jordan Washington is an exciting thought as well, because you can't just discount Demond Williams, which is one of the reasons that I believe Jedd Fisch's offense didn't work to its maximum efficiency last season, because these are things that you just straight up were not able to do with Will Rogers, whether it be the speed option on the goal line, as everyone likes to point to, the struggles in the red zone, which the offensive line was certainly a big part of that as well. But this is where adding Demond Williams adds so much to this offense. And I know people are going to say, well, he's unproven. He's only got 2 starts under his belt. Those things are all very true. And there are a lot of circumstances that come around with this of, obviously you got to see him live up to these expectations for a full season. You need to see him take those steps forward. But he showed so much last year, not just with these physical talents, but with just how mentally strong he is as well, and how able he is to process a defense and make the right read on a play in, play out basis. He made a couple of bad throws last year, but most of them were just thrown out of bounds. The only true bad throw he made was the pick 6 in the Sun Bowl, which was just a bad read. And it's something that every quarterback has made before. And as we continue to see him grow and progress throughout his college career, those are things that are already being eliminated. We've seen him make a couple of bad decisions and throws into double coverage during fall camp, but that's one thing where I feel like it's something that becomes cliche with a lot of the great quarterbacks in college football and in the NFL, is he doesn't make the same mistake twice. I haven't seen him do that. He has made similar questionable throws into double coverage at different points during fall practice, but he identifies those routes and those coverages, and then he doesn't make that throw again, because he did that today, where there was a play where he was looking in a 7-on-7 drill for wide receiver Justice Williams, who was running an out route and was covered by Takario Davis, and Leroy Bryant was also sitting underneath, and it was a really questionable throw. Takario made a nice play to get to the PBU, but wasn't able to get both hands on it for an interception. So it's a, you live for the next play kind of thing. But I didn't see him make a throw like that for the rest of practice. And that's something where, as we continue to move forward, it's very clear that he's learning what he can and can't do at a very, very fast pace. And that's something where it's very exciting to see what this non-conference schedule can look like against Colorado State, against UC Davis, against Washington State. Because if he can figure out all those little kinks in the non-conference schedule before he gets to Ohio State and Maryland and the opening of that Big Ten schedule, there's so much to like just about everything he brings to the table from a physical and mental standpoint, that there's no reason to expect that he can't be one of the top 5 or even top 3 really quarterbacks in the Big Ten by the end of the season, because he just has that level of talent. And it's what makes him such an exciting weapon, is every single thing about him. Not only has Jedd Fisch already figured out a way to use, but it's not like it's super raw. Like, I think that DJ Lagway down at Florida is an immensely talented quarterback, but he's still raw in so many areas of his game that DeMond, in his very brief starting experience last year, showed he is already kind of beyond that, where I like to think about the fumble that he had against Eastern Michigan last year. He didn't make a mistake like that again, where he just knew that he needs to protect the ball and do things a little bit differently from that point on. And it's why just another reason why he's so efficient is he's not making these mistakes over and over and over again. He has the freshman moments like every quarterback does, but the way he moves forward is a really exciting thing to watch. And I couldn't be more excited to watch him on the field this fall, because Washington is going to put a really strong team around him, which was my biggest takeaway from Wednesday's practice. And we'll get to that right after a message from our good friends over at Wayfair. As summer winds down, there's something nice about getting back into a routine you love. And Wayfair makes it easy to set yourself up for the season ahead. From bedding and linens to storage solutions for every room, Wayfair is your one-stop shop to refresh your home. I've been looking for a new couch out in my main room, and I think that Wayfair has a wonderful selection, and it's going to be the perfect addition to my home, no matter which one I wind up choosing. Get organized, refreshed, and back to routine for way less. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Let's start with everyone's favorite player to hear about. That's Zach Durfee. Zach Durfee had a really, really impressive practice today, where there was one drive during the team periods. And just a reminder for all the everydayers out there, Washington was in shells today, so it's just shoulder pads, not full pads. It means you're still going at 80, 90% speed, but no tackling involved. But Zach Durfee, it doesn't matter. First of all, that guy always plays at full speed, but he just had a really, really impressive back-to-back reps against backup tackle Maximus McCree. There was a lot of first-team defense versus second-team offense and first-team offense versus second-team defense kind of things going on today. And Durfee just proved what kind of pass rusher he can be when he's healthy and right, because the first rep against Maximus McCree, he did a really good job of beating him to the outside with speed, nice little rip move to get around his outside shoulder and just get to, I was going to say wrap up, but it's not that. Then just get to quarterback Kai Horton in the backfield before he had a chance to finish his drop, really, for a loss of 8-9 yards. And then on the very next play, he showed off just one of the other reasons that Washington's coaching staff is so excited about him. After going to that rip move to get outside on the play before, he just went straight through McCree and did a really nice job with a bull rush to get into the backfield once again, just basically walked him back into Kai Horton for a second sack. And it turned the drive that was first and 10 into like 3rd and 24, 3rd and 25, something in that ballpark, because Durfee just has that level of game-changing ability. And to tie this in for what we were talking about a little bit earlier, this is one of those guys where I don't necessarily think he's the perfect player to talk about in terms of unlocking this defense's full potential, in terms of they're going to move him around in different spots schematically, or maybe we might see him lining up in a zero technique over the center a little bit, a lot like Nick Scorton did during his time at Purdue. But this is a guy who Washington's coaching staffs, whether it was Kalen DeBoer's back in the day or Jedd Fisch's last year and this year, have been really excited about what he brings to the table, because he's just such a good athlete. The problem outside of 2023, has just been making sure he stays healthy. If he was able to do what he did on the field today for an entire season, obviously you're going to be more than happy with that. But who's going to expect 2 sacks a game out of anybody, truly? This is the kind of guy who I think is a really strong run defender. He did a great job setting the edge when he was on the field at different points last season. And he's also shown that he can get after the quarterback. If he can do that, he does so much for this Ryan Walters scheme, where if you're playing on a 5 down front, but you're going to commit a tight end or running back or somebody to stay in and chip Zach Durfee in pass protection, you're still opening up so many other opportunities for other players to get to the quarterback, whether it be Anterio Thompson, Taitaio Young, Logan Sagapolu even, where that's been the first team defensive line for interior, for a good majority of reps throughout fall camp, with Jacob Lane as the other starting outside linebacker while Isaiah Ward deals with an injury. I look at that front and I think there's a lot to like there, but Zach Durfee, again, is the guy who really unlocks it. And I look just all over this defensive line. If you can find one or two other guys who can just consistently win these one-on-one battles that this five-man front is going to create, this defense is bound to take a step forward. And Zach Durfee is the guy who is going to just be at the forefront of that, because you need one true pass rusher who can just get quarterbacks to have to step up in the pocket when they're playing contain or do different things like that. And I feel like during his very brief stint of being healthy at different points last season, he's already shown that he can be that kind of player. And he's certainly that kind of athlete. So I'm really excited to see what he's going to bring to the table going forward. Now, this is an odd transition, but it's the best way I can do it. Let's talk about another guy who I'm curious to see what he can bring to the table, but I'm not sure how much that's going to be as of right now. That's Audric Harris. Audric Harris is one of, as Kevin Cummings said yesterday, 7 or 8 players that are fighting for a spot in Washington's 2 deeps. I think the starting receivers are more than solidified at this point. It does feel like it's going to be Denzel Boston, Rasheed Williams, and Omari Evans. And then I kind of look behind those guys and I just think to myself, what is this going to look like? Because I know I get questions from everydayers about it. I get just questions from friends of mine who are following the team about what's going on. And the best answer I can give is I'm not sure. And Audric Harris is the perfect encapsulation of that, because I think he had a really nice day-to-day at practice while mainly working with the first team, working with Damon Williams, where after Kevin Cummings said in the spring that they feel like they threw too much at Audric Harris last year as a coaching staff, and they wanted him to really focus on the slot, which is where he was best in high school, Bishop Gorman. That plan was kind of thrown out the window for the most part during fall camp, where we've seen him line up on the outside a decent amount. He's certainly still lining up in the slot, but it just kind of plays into this curiosity factor that I have, because again, he had a really nice day working with Damon Williams. He had 3, 4, 5 catches, and a good majority of them just turned into chunk plays where he's got the catch and run factor. He's got the nice long speed to be able to break away from defenders. But I'm just so curious to see what it's going to look like, because I look at what Desmond Roebuck's brought to the field this fall. I think he might still be one step behind because he was a June enrollee. I still think that if he continues to play the way he has during fall camp, Washington's coaching staff won't have a choice but to put him on the field this fall, and I'm in full support of that. But I also look at what Kevin Green brings to the field as a run blocker, as someone who just understands where he needs to be when Damon Williams rolls out of the pocket. And I don't necessarily think that Audric is there right now, which may be one of the reasons that they're trying him out wide. And Chris Lawson is somebody else who, when he's in there, he's someone who also flashes in the slot, as he understands just that awareness of, oh, I know my quarterback's rolling out to the right. Let me make sure I go with him and get beyond the sticks to either, throw a block if need be, or just be there as a security blanket for Damon at all times. And Audric, it just seems like, as this coaching staff has watched him grow, his skill set might just be a little bit different. And I don't think that's a bad thing. It's just something where maybe you brought him in and thought he was going to excel in one area, and now you want to make sure that you're trying him out in a different spot where maybe he moves to playing a little bit more in the Z or in the X, where he doesn't have the prototypical size to play the X receiver in this Jedd Fisch offense, but maybe with his field stretching speed, that's what they want to see a little bit more of from him. And a lot of these things kind of lead me to believe that while he might be on the field this season, I don't know how much we're necessarily going to see of him production-wise, because I just think that this coaching staff might want to find a way to get Chris Lawson, Raiden Vinesbright, Desmond Roebuck, a couple of these freshmen on the field, and combined with everyone else that I'm talking about, plus Justice Williams, who we know is a prototypical X receiver, it might be a little tough for Audric to cement himself into a role this season. So after the way his season went last year, where he was on the field, he burned his red shirt, but wasn't necessarily overly involved, maybe the coaching staff wants him to take a little bit more of a backseat this year. Maybe they try to find a way to preserve his red shirt, which wouldn't necessarily be the worst idea. And then coming out in 2026, when you know you're going to have 2 starting spots open, you can have him compete for one of those, and it's no harm, no foul, and you still have 3 years of eligibility to turn him into the player that you were hoping you were going to see maybe a little bit more of in 2024. And it also just does something that we've talked about a lot on this show over the last couple of weeks. It speaks to Washington's depth at wide receiver. There's so many different players and body types that can contribute at that position that I'm just really excited to see how that's going to play out. Last thing I want to mention today is something a little bit off the wall. Where one guy who I'm really excited about, this is not something that's going to impact 2025 or, to be honest, even maybe 2026, is I'm really excited about Jack Shaffer. This is a guy who 3-star recruit coming out of North Dakota in the 2025 class. When I watched this film, I thought he'd be a right tackle through and through. He was playing a left tackle today with the scout team offense. It was during a walkthrough period, so it's not necessarily notable in terms of I thought he was popping in terms of what he was putting together because it's half-speed walkthrough. I'm just curious at what this is going to mean for the offensive line in 2026 and beyond. We look at this 26 offensive line, in all likelihood, you might still have 3 starters cemented. Maybe you're going to even have 4, depending on what happens with John Mills and Paki Finau. But we know Garrett Hatchett's going to be out the door. We know Carver Willis is going to be out the door. So there's going to be several different things that you need to figure out. And with Cody Green, the 5-star offensive tackle, coming in, maybe we're going to see him play a lot right out the gate. I would certainly bet on that if I were you, because that's just one thing that it feels like this coaching staff wants to do with a player of that caliber. And you turn on that tape, you see how he is as an athlete. I think this might play into that as well, because Cody played right tackle at Mater Dei this past season. And maybe that's the long-term plan for Jedd Fisch's coaching staff once he gets on campus, is to keep him on the right side. I have no questions that he certainly could play left tackle if asked, but I think that's one thing that maybe this coaching staff is doing a little bit more looking at with Jack, who really did feel like a traditional right tackle in a very Roger Rosengarten sort of sense, is if Jack is going to play on the left side, maybe this says more about this coaching staff's plan for Cody Green and, maybe even Audric Harris to a certain extent, another 2026 commit. But it's just something that I wanted to throw out there and just have you just, think a little bit about, because as Washington's offensive line continues to grow and evolve, there are a lot of really fun players to just note. And I think as this Big Ten journey continues, Washington has done a really good job putting themselves in a position to succeed along the offensive line. It's just going to take a few years to really see that plan through, because as Jedd Fisch and his coaching staff continue to build this group, I think there's still 1 or 2 more things that they want to not necessarily change, but they want to see continue to evolve before it's, their air quotes, perfect offensive line. But that's all I got for you today. Thank you so much for being here, to all you ever does out there. Truly, thank you so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. And just a reminder, wherever you get your podcast, please make sure to subscribe. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure you click that like button, click that little bell, so you never miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you got any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please give us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Friday.